Hello, I'm Abad. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Okay, welcome to my desk, and here's my transmission, and I'm going to be rebuilding it today. I finally printed the other pieces. That's why there's green and yellow. Green is the original ones I printed, and as you can see, this one is covered in grease. That's why I didn't want to deal with it in the past. Now I'm going to be assembling both of them and applying grease, so might as well get that over with. But one thing I'm going to do is take this cluster apart and swap out the carrier, because these carriers are actually mirror images of each other, and the herringbone is more efficient, at least I feel it's more efficient in one direction, and when this is driven forward, these are driven in reverse. So I want to correct that by swapping out the carrier, and it should fix everything. But yeah, I'll get to that. So I guess first thing is first, I'm going to disassemble this one, and that is done with a 2.5mm Allen. Okay, now that those 4 screws are removed, now what I like to call the locking plate can be removed, as well as the carrier. There you go. It's, like I said, covered in grease. I'm going to immediately put this down, I guess. Okay, one step I forgot to do was put these 3 little, I don't know how well it's going to show up because it's super fluorescent in this camera, but there's 3 little collet pads that get inserted into the back of this planetary, and that is what holds the motor. Yeah, you can't really see that very well, but those are these bolts, and I'm just going to snug them just enough to hold them in place, really, because they're going to need to be a slip fit over the motor shaft. It's probably good enough. And then one more. Hopefully these are the right bolts, because too long and they're going to be a problem. Okay, now that those are in, at least that's what we want, because now it's going to be a little bit harder to access them, because in order to tighten them, this whole thing has to be assembled, and the only way to get at them is through this the center of this gear where the bearing would sit. So anyway, putting the carrier on is just feeding it through the bearings, nice and easy, because these posts are kind of delicate. So, and then now, it doesn't really matter which carrier to use, or locking plate, because they're both the same. But this one I'm going to use because it's already greased up. Now we've got that on there, we can put it back down. And then there are 4 bolts right here I'm going to use. So on these bolts, you just kind of snug up, because they are really just holding the locking plate in, and then wedging the little sides. I don't know if you can see, but these posts are split, and the locking plate has this cone in it, so as it gets tightened, it spreads that those tabs and locks it in place against the inside of the bearing instead of holding it down tight. So if you put too much force on it, it actually could bind the transmission too much. So that's one thing to keep an eye out. Alright, so this cluster is done. Should spin freely. There's a little bit of binding in here, but that's that'll go away, I'm sure, from it being printed. It kind of fuses a little bit in 4 spots where the planetary gears meet the ring gear, but it's already pretty smooth, so I'm not too concerned about it. So yeah, the other one, maybe I'll just fast forward through the whole thing. Gear clusters, I guess. Green and gold and green. And then we got our housing, which this should anyway fit inside. Yeah, there we go. Fit inside that and slip over the motor shaft. First we have to mount the motor with these 4 bolts and have the shaft go through this bearing that I already installed. I also previously installed plastic embedment nuts or inserts, little brass inserts that you use the soldering iron to insert into the 3D print. Okay, so I got my motor. Apparently a bunch of oil all over it. So now we're gonna simply slide the motor, or the shaft of the motor, into the bearing, and then line up the bolt pattern. And I got these M4 bolts that I'm gonna use to secure the motor. So that should spin freely, and it does. So the next step is to drop the cluster in. I'm gonna just use this one with the yellow ring gear, and I made this center the sun gear. You can't really see it. Well, maybe you can. It's got a D shaft or bore on it, and that's for the D shaft on the motor. I don't know if you can pick that up, but the flat is on this side, which, yeah, you can kind of see it. Anyway, it's right here. And I'm going to line that up just to make it a little bit more secure. There we go. It's just spinning the carrier works. Okay, so this should, there we go. That is about as far as it needs to go. So here's the part where you secure the motor shaft. I have a 2.5mm ball nose Allen that I'm going to use to tighten these socket head cap screws. You want to kind of do it equally so each collet pad gets pulled equally. So there's equal pressure on all sides of the shaft, and hopefully it won't slip. Okay, so that's in, it's tight. Next step is to assemble the output shaft. One of my coworkers luckily did the turning for this shaft, and then I just had to do the keyway and the bolt pattern, which didn't take very long. But this is going to have the output gear on it, and it's secured by 6 flathead screws. By the way, this output shaft is actually stainless steel, not carbon steel. It's not hardened or anything, so see how well it works. But there you go, it's mounted on there nice and secure. Here's the transmission case. It's got 4 M5 plastic embedment nuts and then 3 M3 bolts, and those will become apparent in a little bit. One of the last steps of the transmission is to push this bearing in place, which kind of has to be a nice loose fit because you can't really put all that much pressure on it without potentially messing something up. That looks like it's in there as much as it's going to go. So now putting the transmission or the output shaft in the case, and then putting the case on top, and you have to assemble it kind of in a weird manner. There we go. Now it's in position, and I should be able to tighten these case bolts down. So that bearing, the last bearing that we put in is on the other side of this. What we do is we push this little plug through. Okay, so I put the little plug in that holds the bearing, that holds everything nice and tight. Put that in. Now I'm going to apply or put the screws in that secure it. Okay, so that transmission is done. You can see it's a quite slow 6-to-1 gear ratio. You're looking at this reflective tape here, and then the keyway. So 1 rotation, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Thank you for watching, and tune in next time.